Welcome, everyone, to episode 89 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan Anderson, coming to you from the continent of California. Early Sunday morning. We're heading into the Christmas week out here. A little chilly out here. It's definitely getting colder as the season gets longer. So, this used to be a one-person podcast. It wasn't very good. So I brought in two of my friends. They've made the podcast a lot of fun. We had some really good episodes where we talked about sports, wrestling, social issues, the finer things in life, such as gingerbread house etiquette, and we were all lifelong sports fans. So talked a lot about the Kings, the Lakers, things like that. That was a great run. Shout out to Ricky and Marcus. And now I got back to doing just a one-man show. One thing I found, as three guys in their mid-30s, it's really hard to get all of us together for one podcast a week. So I decided to go back to doing a one-person show, to where I pretty much find people on social media that I either follow or interact with. And the good thing about social media is you can customize your news feed and what you like to the stuff that you find important. And one of the bigger things in my life is pro wrestling. This is generally either a pro wrestling or sports-centric podcast. So this week will be no different, but I want to let you guys know where you can find all the episodes of the podcast and follow me. So all 89 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, pretty much wherever you get podcasts, you can find the show. And you can find it by searching Gully Blanchard, which is GULLYBLANCHARD. I'm also available at nocoastbias.com. I'm in the midst of doing a WWE NFL style mock draft, to where I take the guys that are coming out in the NFL draft this year. And instead of doing the normal boring adjectives that you guys are all used to seeing with the NFL guys about guys being, a fast twitch muscle fiber, take it and do something a little bit different. And I put a lot of wrestling terms on it just to have some fun with it, because sports are, at the end of the day, supposed to be fun. I also do a little bit of covering for a Royal Pain by covering the Sacramento Kings. Been a fan of the Kings my entire life, through the good years, the bad years, the gold jersey eras, and everything else. So you can check it out there. This week's podcast is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be real wrestling heavy, as the last couple ones have been. Wrestling is something that brings people together from all different walks of life, all different eras. You get a lot of good dialogue, a lot of fun conversations with wrestling. I don't think this one's going to be any different this week. So without further ado, I want to bring in the guest, Chris Van Vliet. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
No problem, man. So I know you do a lot of stuff in Miami as far as covering, covering news and covering everything out there. But where can people find you on social media? What kind of stuff are they going to get when they look at your YouTube channels?
So it's just my name, at Chris Van Vliet on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, VANVLIET. And if you're a wrestling fan, you might be familiar with some of my interviews. I do a lot of wrestling interviews on my YouTube channel. I've been trying to do about one a week. Last week I had an up-and-coming wrestler by the name of John Cena. I did an interview with him. And I just posted one with Brian Pillman Jr. yesterday. So if you're a wrestling fan and you've watched wrestling interviews on YouTube, there's a chance that maybe you've seen some of my stuff.
I will say that John Cena, I think he's got a bright future in the business. I think.
Yeah, he might. he might be going places. That John Cena, especially with that new hair.
He plays his cards right. He might have a couple world title runs in him. I'm not sure.
Maybe a few. Who knows?
Yeah. So that was kind of something that drew me to you via social media, your love and passion for pro wrestling. But I want to bring it back a little bit. How did you first, as a kid, or did you as a kid first get into pro wrestling?
I remember going to my grandfather's house when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and like wearing pajama pants and running around the house pretending I was the 1, 2, 3 kid, because he would have Saturday morning wrestling on. But growing up from there, I wrestled in high school, like amateur wrestling. And you're kind of told when you're an amateur wrestler that you shouldn't be paying attention to pro wrestling, because that stuff's, air quotes, fake. And the amateur wrestling that we were doing was, real. But there was just something about it that, like you said, before, something about wrestling that just unites us and draws us in. So I was in high school during the Attitude Era, and I just got so sucked in by the Austin McMahon stuff and the Austin Rock stuff. and Triple H was one of my favorites in 2000, 2001. My parents, though, absolutely hated it. My dad would I would watch wrestling in the basement, and my dad would come in and turn the TV off and stand in front of the TV and get mad because, let's be honest, it was, they were really pushing the envelope back then, and you had a lot of stuff that my dad didn't love, Austin disrespecting his boss and brawn panty matches. And yeah, my parents were were not a fan of that. So I kind of had to sneak in my wrestling viewership when I was younger. Obviously, they're fine with it now, though.
Of course. Yeah. And I think that's something, I grew up around that same area. It was something that as a kid, I don't know, as a 14-year-old kind of discovering the world and discovering who I was, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world to see, Austin drinking a beer, or seeing Trish Stratus, or, even before the Trish Stratus, seeing the Sunnies and the Sables of the world. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world to go on America Online and download all of that. But I could also imagine, as we get older, being a parent, and I don't know if I want my 13-year-old watching, a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin, having a fake gun, which, you thought he was going to shoot his boss, or even the Pillman Austin angle before that. You can definitely see how parents may not have been a huge fan of their kids watching that.
For sure. And I mean, for me, it branched out into backyard wrestling. And me and 8 of my friends had this actually pretty popular backyard wrestling federation in my hometown of Pickering, Ontario, Canada. And my parents were so worried that I was going to, break my neck or break my arm. And, to their point, one of my friends broke his leg twice. So I could understand why they'd be concerned, but I was watching and making notes of oh, that's how you do a swanton bomb. Mm-hmm. And that's a terribly dangerous move to do.
Yes. I think every kid has some kind of experience of understanding how much the figure 4, the sharpshooter, does actually hurt. Because I remember that as a kid too. We learned how to put the sharpshooter on each other by watching, Brett or Owen or Davey or any of those guys. We didn't have a backyard thing, but where I grew up in Sacramento, they had a day once every 3 or 4 months where people would put their trash out, and people would come pick it up, the stuff you just didn't need and couldn't get there. And one day someone brought a mattress out that they had to get rid of, and we somehow as kids, we got it on our bikes and we put it in our front lawn, and we were jumping off the roof, doing elbow drops onto each other, landing on a mattress. And that was just a rite of passage as a kid.
Yeah. Every trampoline doubled as a wrestling ring when you were a kid. I get it.
Yeah. It was something that no matter what, you always thought, I could just do the elbow drop, or you could find a way to power slam someone. But like you said, even as a swanton, as a kid, I thought that was one of the coolest moves in the world because of how, Jeff Hardy was the first guy I saw to do it, how he would rotate at the tail end of that move, and you watch it back as an adult, and it's you messed that up by 1/4 of an inch, and that could have some real dire consequences for you.
Oh yeah. And I got to the point where I was 16, 17 years old, and if there was a pile of leaves or a pile of snow where I grew up, I would find the highest thing I could find and do a swanton bomb off of it into this pile of leaves or snow. And my friends thought I was crazy, and they were probably right.
Yeah. I definitely remember getting speared into a couple pools as a kid. We would go to we would go to the neighborhood pools, and we would catch footballs on the edge of the pool, and one of our friends would come in and spear us. And again, you miss that move by 1/4 of an inch, it could have some of the worst consequences. But you're 14 years old and you think you're indestructible.
Oh yeah, no, I understand that, and we've all been there.
Yes. So you said that you did amateur wrestling as a kid and was a fan of the Attitude Era. Did that coming up as an amateur wrestler, did that sort of lend you to the Kurt Angles, the Lesnars, the Shelton Benjamins? Or did you become bigger fans of those guys because of your history of amateur wrestling as a youngster?
Yeah, I had so much respect for Angle, and I just loved the way that Kurt Angle made it look authentic and made it look real. And that, that branches out into other guys that maybe didn't have that amateur background, but did make it authentic, like a Chris Benoit or an Eddie Guerrero. I really loved that style of wrestling that felt real, that chain wrestling that that feels real. At the same time, though, I have a ton of respect for the high flyers, and I love when guys can do stuff that makes you go, wow. When I saw AJ Styles doing some of his stuff for the very first time in TNA, I'm like, it just doesn't even seem human. Like that's unbelievable.
I just recently saw a clip again, and it's funny because you sometimes with YouTube you can go down rabbit holes. Like YouTube and Wikipedia for me are the worst. To where I'll look up like a 2006 TNA pay-per-view, and then I'll find out that like AJ wrestled Joe, and then I'll look at like Bobby Roode at that time, and I'll end up on YouTube, and you'll get stuck there forever. But one thing about AJ from where he was to where he is, those X Division matches that he would have were like those guys would take bumps off the top of a steel cage. I remember watching something where like Elix Skipper did a Hurricane Rana off the top of the cage, and you watch that stuff, and it's like, how do you fathom, like how does one say, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I've got this guy on the top of the cage. I'm going to do a move that would normally be dangerous off the top rope, and then I'm going to try that same move off the top of a steel cage, and we're both going to trust that we're going to hit this move simultaneously and do it to where we both protect each other.
The thing is, that Elix Skipper move is unbelievable. I mean, he's basically walking the tightrope on top of this cage, which is 15-ish feet in the air, if not more. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you practice that. Like I don't think you can.
Yeah.
You don't get out there before the show with no crowd in an empty arena and practice it over and over again. I think you just go for it, which is the craziest thing about that move.
Yeah. I think that's one thing where I've always been of the belief to where pro wrestlers, to do what they do 365 days a year or even 300 days a year, with the amount of physical toll that sport takes, and the dieting, the exercising, and just the day-to-day grind of doing that. It's why I have so much respect for what they do, because to keep up in the kind of shape that you look at a guy like Brock, when you talked about that Benoit Eddie Guerrero era, like Brock was huge around that time too. But for guys like Brock or even Batista to keep up looking like you're a bodybuilder going on stage, to keep that look up year round and have to travel and diet, even guys like Elix Skipper or AJ, to have to do that physical style of wrestling, to do that year round, is such an incredible toll it can take on your body.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why you have to have respect for the guys that are on the WWE schedule. But I really appreciate what Lucha's doing, what Lucha Underground's doing, with basically saying, it's a TV show. We're going to have episodes and we're going to have a season. And when we're not filming, you can go do your own thing if you want, but come back here for the next season. And I appreciate that. At the same time, I understand why WWE is the machine that it is, cranking out live shows every single week. But it takes such a toll on your body, and everyone that leaves there says the same thing, like that it's such a grind. No one that leaves WWE ever says in an interview like, oh, I loved being on the road that much. I loved sleeping in hotels and driving rental cars and being on an airplane every other day. Like, that takes such a toll on you. And to stay in the shape that you're talking about there with some of these bigger guys, sleep is one of the most important things. Like, sure, you got to eat right and you got to be working out heavy, but sleep is the most important thing. And I don't, quite frankly, know how these guys do it.
Yeah, and to talk about that Lucha Underground, like one thing that I like that they're doing is they're providing a good alternative to wrestling fans that may have a difficult time either enjoying the current WWE product. And I think that's one thing with social media that's been really big, to where if you're not a huge fan of what WWE is doing, and everyone's entitled their opinion, you can go find stuff like Lucha Underground, and you can kind of get into that episodic, a TV show that's going to have like a 12 episode season. I think that's with, your Netflix and all that. You have a lot of shows where the binge watching has become really popular. Like, you can binge watch a season of Lucha Underground, and then it leaves you the kind of that anticipation for next season, which I think they're one of the few companies that do it. And I think there is a lane to have that be really successful.
I think you're right with that. I wish that it was available for more people to see or more people to follow. But WWE has created a really interesting thing with, no one watches live TV really anymore. Like, you're not tuning in on a Thursday night at 8:00 to watch Friends like you used to, or Seinfeld. Like, if you're going to watch an episodical show like that, a sitcom or a drama, you're binge watching it, or on an HBO or a Netflix or something like that. So WWE has created a really interesting beast here in going, the only thing you really need to watch live on television is sports and WWE. I mean, everything else you can watch after the fact and not really miss that much. So Vince has created something interesting here where he's going to be able to demand a lot of money, like he did with this Fox deal that we're going to see in the fall of this year. Like that's going to be a really, really big thing. No one watches Fox on Friday night right now, and I can say that because the TV station that I work for is a Fox TV station, and there's not really anything to watch on a Friday night. That you need to tune into, like that appointment viewing. SmackDown is going to completely change that landscape, and I feel like if SmackDown does well on network television, which I think it will, I think that Raw will do the same thing when their contract's up.
Yeah, I think that, to your point, I think the only thing, at least for me, there are a couple shows that I watch. Like I'm a big fan of Shameless and Game of Thrones, but even those aren't necessarily like appointment viewing. Like I think Shameless comes on at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock Eastern. And even that, like if I miss it for, whatever reason, like life gets in the way or something like that, I always tell myself like, oh, I could just watch it Monday morning, or especially now, like with tablets and, your Hulus and your Amazon Primes or your DVRs, like I watch pretty much everything for the most part on my phone. And that's just due to the schedules that we all keep, to where you can watch something like you can watch 30 minutes of an episode of, an ESPN documentary. It's like, oh, I'll just get back to it on my break or on lunch or whatever. And I think that's something that with SmackDown moving to Fox on that, you're right. There's not a lot of appointment viewing other than live sports, because those are really hard. If you miss,
you wouldn't dare tune in to, if I'm a Browns fan, you wouldn't not watch the Browns game and then watch it later on DVR. That's just ridiculous to even talk about it like that. And I think that's the same. I mean, it's a little bit different with wrestling, but if something big enough is happening, you want to be tuning in, like Monday night when Vince McMahon comes back. I obviously get that that's a ploy to bring the ratings up, but we all want to see what he has to say.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what he has to say in that fact, because it's an odd thing. He's one of the few guys that can come back, and there's still that it gets turned into appointment viewing to where Vince is going to come back. As far as the guys that are there on a consistent basis, I think Brock has sort of lost that luster just because of how in and out he's been, to where, like, around WrestleMania 30, if Brock was going to be on TV, you wanted to stop and see what Heyman was going to say or see what that message is. And I think now the shine had the bloom sort of off the rose with that, the Lesnar mystiques. I think fans are just clamoring to have a more consistent champion on TV. But I do think Vince coming back, if nothing else, you at least want to hear what he's going to have to say. If he's going to acknowledge the down ratings, or if he's going to acknowledge, the Brock Lesnar situation or what have you, you at least want to see what he's going to have to say.
I think it's interesting that I think John Cena, since he hasn't really been on television in a while, I think that they should be promoting his appearance bigger than they are. Like, I don't know why he's doing so many house shows before he ever appears on Raw. And I didn't have a chance to ask him that, but that just seems to me like bad booking. Like, shouldn't John Cena stepping foot in a WWE ring again be a big deal? But it's not, apparently. He's going to do 5 or 10 house shows before he goes on Raw. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I wonder if that's to kind of warm up and get acclimated back to the feel of being in the ring. But you are right, though. Like, Cena's reached a level where not a lot of wrestlers, since the Attitude Era have reached, to where he comes back and he moves the needle. Like, a lot of the guys that come back and move the needle are from that era that we grew up watching, like, as teenagers. But Cena's one of the few guys that could come back. And I always say the Attitude Era is like post WrestleMania 20, WrestleMania 21. He's one of the few guys that can come back. I think it's like him and Batista and a small handful of others that you want to tune in to see what they're going to have to say, because you remember watching them so much, and they've got this equity built with the fans to where the fans trust them and the fans want to hear what's going to come out of their mouth.
Yeah, and so I'm interested to see what happens when Cena comes back. Like, are they going to put Cena in this kind of mid-card place where he's putting people over, which I thought was really good with the U.S. title and the Open Challenge? Or is Cena going to get another run, which I think that he deserves? Maybe give him another run or two, and he can ride off into the sunset, because he admitted in the interview with me that he's a part-timer, and he makes no apologies about that, except apologizing to The Rock for calling The Rock a part-timer.
Yeah, those promos were some of those promos, the ones that the Cena had with The Rock, and even CM Punk, the ones that he had with The Rock, those felt so different, because you could kind of feel, and I think that's when wrestling is at its best, to where fans are kind of in tune with what's going on, and as much as we know behind the scenes, but there felt like there was so much truth being blended into a pro wrestling storyline. And I think, those guys at the time, there may have been some animus towards The Rock for doing the whole part-time thing, but Cena has said it. He's like, I'm a part-timer and I didn't understand The Rock at that time. I do understand where he's coming from now. And I think that's just a part of getting older and maturing and having new options and realizing that, like, hey, I'm evolving into a guy who does movies and then does wrestling, as opposed to having, I don't want to say it was jealousy, but I think there was definitely some tension there at that time.
Oh, I agree with that. And it's interesting. Every wrestling fan that's around our age always harkens back to the Attitude Era, and I get it. Like the Attitude Era was great. It was vastly different from the Golden Era, which came before it. But we also seem to forget that the Attitude Era was also the same era that had Naked Midian and had Mae Young giving birth to a hand, and all kinds of other absolutely ridiculous things. Like if you watch a full 2-hour episode back then, if you just randomly picked one out from 1999 or 2000, there'd be some really great parts. There'd also be a bunch of stuff you'd go, the hell is this?
Yes. What's funny is I've a couple years ago, because of the network, and you can stream everything at any time, which is an amazing, like, I love this. This network has been incredible for me as a fan, but like I've watched every Mania, every Monday Nitro, and I started watching Monday Night Raw thinking like, okay, I'll start at episode 1. I'll see how far I get. Like I might get to episode, 300 and get to the Attitude Era. Well, I'm now at episode 649, and I've watched them. Yeah, I've watched them one by one in sequential order, and I can say with conviction, the Attitude Era really wasn't as great as we want to remember it to be. And I think that does come with, as a teenager, we kind of romanticize that era because that was sort of when it's at its zenith from a popularity standpoint. But a lot of that stuff doesn't really age well. Like if you were to take out some of the Austin promos and the Rock promos from most Monday Night Raws, you're struggling to get through a Goldust with a gag ball in his mouth against Mark Marrow. A lot of that stuff doesn't age well. And I think a lot of times we miss the promos of the Austin and the Rock. And I'm in that same boat as well. Although I am one of the few that I enjoy post WrestleMania 17 Austin promos, like the interactions he would have with Angle or the what chants or the comedy stuff. I thought that was funnier and more entertaining than the Austin 316 stuff, but that's just my opinion. But like that whole era was fun, but you had to get through a lot of bad stuff to get to the good.
Yeah, I agree, and I that's why I think that the era that we're living in now, I think we're going to look back on in 5 or 10 or 20 years and go, man, there was some really good stuff, like the actual in-ring wrestling that we get on Mondays. Maybe it's not perfect every week, but there's been some really, really great matches on Raw.
I've long said this, and I think that we can kind of relate because we're on the same page here. I think from an in-ring standpoint, it's probably the best in-ring consistent product you're getting in a long time. My only qualm is that the characters they all kind of seem the same. Like no one really seems to stand out. For example, if you were to put on that Seth Rollins Kevin Owens match, it was like Kevin Owens' last match, I think, in WWE till before he went out due to injury. Like that match in itself is one of the best matches that you would see in a year in like 2000 or 2001. If you got a match like that in the Attitude Era, it would stand out forever. Yeah. That match in 2018 is kind of like, oh yeah, these guys put on another a 5-star classic, or the matches that like even Roman Reigns would have with Cesaro. Like those are some of the best matches that Reigns would have, and they just kind of felt like when you get steak every day by like the 10th day, it's like, oh cool, this is a steak. It doesn't taste the same. But then you look back and it's like, oh my God, I had steak every day for 10 days. And I think you're right. Like we're gonna look back at this era and say like we were fortunate enough to have like AJ Styles against Daniel Bryan or Daniel Bryan against Mustafa Ali. And I think if we even look back like 10 years before that, and I don't really want to speak ill on a lot of wrestlers, but like we were getting great Khali and Bobby Lashley matches for the WWE Championship.
Yeah.
I think we've came a long way.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way as well. And I think that NXT is certainly helping that. NXT's, I mean, the matches that that Johnny and Tommaso have been having, and it's Aleister Black in there, and any number of NXT guys. I think that they've helped to raise the bar as well.
Yeah, no, NXT has been something to where WWE's gotten really good at, like, if you don't like Raw, you can always watch SmackDown. If you're not a fan of SmackDown for whatever reason, they provide their fans a lot more options. Like, there are some people that are just that I know that only watch NXT. They don't watch Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah.
But I know people that solely watch Raw, or people that solely now watch NXT UK. So there's so many different options. And you're right about Ciampa Gargano. Like, that seems to be such a, I don't want to use the term old school feud, but it just feels like it's a feud that can keep going. And it's something to where I wasn't a huge fan of this Gargano turn, just because I think he's a natural babyface. But
right.
I thought that, I'm still looking forward to Ciampa Gargano, hopefully at NXT and at Barclays at WrestleMania weekend, because I think that's going to be your moment where, Gargano finally gets his babyface moment as in the sun to get that title. But they do a very good job building up sensical storylines. I think that might be something that may be missing on certain shows.
I think it's interesting to point out that there are WWE fans and there are wrestling fans, and the two are not the same. Like, yes. There's a lot of people that will watch Raw or watch SmackDown and don't even know that independent wrestling shows are happening 10 minutes from where they live. Mm-hmm. And I find that really interesting, that they love the product, they love the TV show of Raw, but they don't love wrestling enough to, drive 10 minutes, spend $15 and watch some great, incredible up-and-coming wrestlers, which I went to MLW on Friday night here in Miami, and it was, Brian Pillman and Tommy Dreamer and Harry Smith, Low Key. I mean, Conan was there, and it's just, great in-ring wrestling that you can see in person. And I wish that there was more of a crossover.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that the one place where you get sort of that crossover is social media. For example, like, I am the first person to readily admit I didn't know everything about, New Japan Pro Wrestling until I got into Twitter and got heavier into the internet. Like, you can understand a little bit more about what the G1 Climax is, or Wrestle Kingdom. And even to your point about, MLW, like, living in California, like, we wouldn't really get a lot of options. The Northern California indie scene isn't really strong. I don't want to speak ill on it. It's just not as enticing as it is. But, stuff like MLW or guys like Harry Smith, you can still follow those guys, where I think is in years past or decades previously, once those guys and girls sort of left the WWE or WCW umbrella, it was really hard to keep up with what they were doing. And I think with stuff like MLW or Lucha or Progress, having access to it via social media definitely gives us a good opportunity to follow a lot of stuff that we may not have access to.
And there's more wrestling now than there's ever been. And,
yes.
Back in the day, you used to have to mail tapes to people.
Mm-hmm.
You would record VHSs of Raw or Nitro or Thunder or SmackDown or whatever it happened to be. Now everything's available either on YouTube or on the network. I've been saying this for years, but it's true. It's the greatest time to be a pro wrestling fan and the greatest time to be a pro wrestler.
Yeah, I think this time that we're in right now is such an amazing time, because the buffet seemingly has gotten bigger, in a sense, to where, just like you said, when we were younger, like WWF and WCW were the two main brands that you would watch. And, ECW had that underground sort of like groundswell of like, oh my God, you've got to buy this tape like off of High Spots or something. You got to see this ECW thing. And, if one person had the tape, everyone went over to that house to watch it. And now you can watch the latest MLW show online, or through like Fightful, or through, different apps or different things. You can watch you can watch a great match that maybe, like, for example, back when Ricochet and Will Ospreay set the internet ablaze with that match that they had, like, you can now get access to that stuff at a moment's notice online. I think we have more choices to look for in the buffet that is pro wrestling.
So let me ask you this, Ryan. What is your all-time favorite match?
Oh boy. I would say Punk Cena Money in the Bank. I would say Austin Hart. I would say Benoit Angle at the Royal Rumble. I want to say that was 2002.
Yep. Yeah.
and Austin Rock WrestleMania 19, which I will die on this hill alone that I think that was the better WrestleMania match out of the three. I think it goes 19, 17, 15, but that's my opinion.
Which was the one with the like over the top ridiculous selling of the stunner by The Rock?
That would be, I think that was 17 and 19 because I know.
Yeah, definitely 17.
Yeah, everyone said everyone likes 17 better, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I just thought 17 was ruined by the heel turn at the end. It didn't work for me. At the end of that match, I think it was just, you had a great dinner and then you had a really bad dessert, and you remember the bad dessert, you don't remember the great dinner. But I think,
Yeah. Yeah, it's that recency bias. It's the
yeah,
they leave you on that note, and you forget about everything that happened before that.
yeah, I like watching Austin Rock 3 at WrestleMania 19 a little bit better, but it's a personal preference thing for me.
I was at WrestleMania 18, my first ever WrestleMania. I'm from Toronto, and it was in Toronto. And Rock Austin gives me goosebumps even just to talk about it. The reaction from the crowd at the start of that match is unlike anything we had ever seen before, and unlike anything we'll ever see again. And I'm a 35-year-old man, and I have a poster of WrestleMania 18, Icon versus Icon, on my bedroom wall. You can clearly tell I'm not married because that wouldn't be, acceptable. But last time I interviewed Hogan, I said, I got to get you to sign this. I got to get you to autograph this. He told me a really cool story. He said that the face turn at the end of Hogan, where the NWO came out and beat him up, wasn't planned. He said that Vince knew that Hogan would be over, but he didn't realize how over he was. Like, Hogan was supposed to be a heel going into that match, and the crowd was going crazy for Hogan. So I guess during the match, Vince got Hall and Nash together and said, at the end of the match, you're going to go and you're going to beat up Hogan. And I said to Hogan, I said, did you know this? He goes, no, the ref just told me to stay in the ring, and I didn't know it was going to happen. And Hall and Nash came down, beat him up, and the next day he had the red and yellow. And I said, how did you have that ready to go? He's like, I didn't. We were in Toronto. As soon as WrestleMania ended, Vince chartered his plane for me. I flew down to Tampa, went through all my old stuff, got my red and yellow stuff. He's like, I didn't think most of it was going to fit because I hadn't worn it in years. So he chartered his plane down there, went through like all these boxes, got his red and yellow stuff, then flew from there. I believe they were in Montreal the next night. So he went from Toronto at like midnight down to Tampa to get his gear, to then right back to Montreal to make it happen. Like, I thought that story was just so crazy that he told me that.
Yeah, that's such a fun match to where, like, I think like pro wrestling, when it's done right, is a lot of fun, and it's always going to be like a lot of fun. And in that match, it was so much fun, as far, like you said, with the crowd energy. And like I remember the beginning of that match where they had that shot where they just like looked around and you could just tell they were absorbing everything that was going on. And I think that's one of the best parts about pro wrestling, is like, we kind of know what we're watching as a fan, but these guys are still in the ring to tell a story, and to get caught up in that emotion, and then just to see those guys like stop before the match started and think like, oh my God, like, listen to this crowd reaction that we're getting. And we're going to take them on this wild emotional roller coaster. And then not only that, to be able to recognize what's going on in the crowd, because the crowd definitely did pivot towards Hogan during the match. Like, there were spots where those guys would exchange blows, and you could see the negative reaction towards The Rock and the positive one to Hogan. So to be able to change the entire structure of that match, on the fly, is something that's incredible to me.
I think that there's a moment where Hogan knocks down Rock and flexes, and the crowd just goes insane. And you can see this childish look in Hogan's eyes, and he can't believe that the crowd is so over for him. And I just love seeing that moment, because it's like, that's it for me. That was just the epitome of that match. I understand that the wrestling in that match isn't, incredible, but the crowd reaction is great. For me, in terms of actual in-ring wrestling, Joe Daniels and AJ had an amazing X Division match in TNA, and it's like, I wish that we could have that style of wrestling in WWE. And I mean, AJ is not even the same wrestler. I mean, if you put a mask on AJ Styles and showed me his moveset now versus what he was doing in TNA, I wouldn't believe it's the same guy. Like he just does a lot of stuff that's very different. And I get that he needs to protect himself as he's getting into his 40s, but I miss AJ Styles' moveset from TNA.
Miss X Division TNA. You know what's funny about that match? That was one of the first matches of TNA that I had saw, and it was because like that was sort of like their first match that kind of, I don't want to say broke them through, but like that was the match that if you were a wrestling fan online, like everyone was talking about. And I remember being at work late on during the week, and I remember watching that match on YouTube. And I think that was one of the first matches that you were available on YouTube, because at the time WWE Network, obviously wasn't there, and there wasn't a lot of streaming options that there are now. But like, I remember watching that match on YouTube, being blown away with what those three guys did.
I remember having to download those matches on LimeWire or Kazaa or Kazaa, whatever it was called.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like I would just type in like TNA, and I can download those matches. And you type in WWE, those matches are available. Yeah. And I had like a whole hard drive filled up with these matches. It's so funny how far we've come since then.
Yeah, and to think that was 15 years ago, and like now we're having like this medium on a computer while you can stream, Monday Night Raw on your phone. It is very interesting to see where we've came as a wrestling community in just 15 years.
And I wonder where we're going to go from here. Wrestling's obviously very it goes in its cycles, and I feel like everyone's kind of dogging Raw right now, and I get it. It hasn't been great these last couple of weeks, but that's kind of just how it goes. And we're getting into Royal Rumble territory here in the next month, which takes us to the road to WrestleMania. We're on the cusp of watching some great wrestling again, and I'm really interested to see how this WrestleMania card's going to shape up.
I am too. In the qualm that I have with people, I get that Raw isn't what it once was. Like I understand that. I'm not, but I also think like if you go back and like you said, if you go back and watch a Monday Night Raw from 1999, or where I'm at right now, I'm in November 2005. Like even if you go back and watch one of the Raws from 2005, like if you're going to tell me if I'm going to get Seth Rollins or against Finn Balor in the main event, or I'm going to have to watch, and this is no disrespect to either one of these two guys, if I'm going to have to watch like Eugene against Rob Conway, I'm taking Seth Rollins and Finn Balor 10 times out of 10 for the main event of any Monday Night Raw.
I still can't believe that Eugene got like title shots. Like that was just
legit title shots too.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get why they put him over so much. Like, did he have pictures of Vince or something? Was he like, I'm going to release these?
He was having I think he had a match at SummerSlam, because I didn't watch the actual pay-per-views. I just watched the Raws leading up to him. But I believe he had a match that year at SummerSlam with Kurt Angle. That was the Hogan, Shawn Michaels SummerSlam. But yeah, he had a match with Kurt Angle, like a legit match. And it's really hard because you'd see him, I'd watch him wrestle, and the character he portrayed, he would have these spots in the matches where he would do something that would look like a very solid wrestling move, but then he would kind of remember I'm still kind of playing this character.
Oh yeah.
To see he wasn't bad, but it also wasn't very entertaining looking back on it. So when I hear fans talk about Raw's horrible and this and that, I get that it isn't as probably entertaining from a character development standpoint as it used to be. But if you're going to tell me I get Ruby Riott against, Natty and Seth Rollins against Finn Balor, I'll take that 10 times out of 10 over, Victoria against, whoever in a 2-minute match, or a 20-minute Diva Search segment, or, Carlito against, whoever in the main event that just wasn't as entertaining as what we have to watch now.
It's interesting how much wrestling has evolved and changed, even, from the Attitude Era and beyond. I sent a clip to my buddy the other day of, you've probably seen it. It's this funny promo where The Rock is cutting a promo on Mankind and his voice is cracking. The Rock's voice is cracking during the promo. And I sent my buddy the clip and he goes, dude, The Rock said retard. I'm like, oh yeah, that would not fly now.
Mm-mm.
And and then the Eugene character in general, that's just that wouldn't fly either. I get that they're trying to appeal to a global audience, but it limits them in a way. And I'm not saying we should be saying retard on TV, or we shouldn't have Billy and Chuck basically making fun of gay people or making a parody of it or satire of it, but they've kind of limited themselves because they want to appeal to everyone with this global audience and this PG rating.
Yeah, it's something to where in 2018 you probably couldn't do the Mexicools entrance again, where you had those guys coming out on you couldn't and you shouldn't do that in 2018, but it does. I think that's one of the challenges we had, where Vince always kind of went with the low hanging fruit with like the stereotypes of people from certain backgrounds, and I think now we're not getting that, and that's a good thing.
Oh man, try explaining Crime Time to someone who doesn't watch wrestling. Like
I would not like to do that.
Here's two African American men who are going to steal items and then sell them to people. Like you can't get more stereotypical than that.
Yeah, and then I remember like the Kofi Kingston had a Jamaican accent, and then one week all of a sudden he didn't have a Jamaican accent. It was very strange. Like this guy last week had a very heavy Jamaican accent, or even like a guy like Carlito who was debuting. It was Carlito's Cabana. It was like everything that was geared towards every kind of stereotype imaginable. And I'm glad they don't do that in 2018 for the most part. I would like to see them take more chances as far as making the promos that these guys and girls cut feel authentic. I think that's the appeal of Becky Lynch now. Yeah. But I do understand that they are trying to get to, they're trying to get on the ESPNs, and they do a lot of Make-A-Wish stuff and Connor's Cure, which is great. So I do understand you can't have, Austin McMahon and be on Make-A-Wish at the same time. It's very hard to balance both of those plates.
I think it's, you bring up Connor's Cure, which is obviously a great organization, but the Warrior Award is really interesting because if you watch back Ultimate Warrior's Hall of Fame speech, he talked about creating an award for the people behind the scenes. He talked about, like, the award's supposed to be for the cameramen and the writers and the guys who build the ring. If you watch his entire speech, that's what he wants the Warrior Award to be. And somehow they twisted it and changed it so that it honors, these people in the community. And I think that's great, but don't pretend that that's what the Ultimate Warrior wanted this award to be.
There's that, and there's also I kind of have a hard time with the Warrior Award because on one hand, like, I'm happy to see, the young kid Jarius get an award like that, or the Connor's Cure thing. Like, I think those are all great moments for the recipients. I just have a real hard time with a lot of the like the Warrior stuff and the Warrior Spirit stuff, to where if you watch back some of those speeches he had on YouTube, he was not the most welcoming of a lot of different people. And that's hard. It's hard for me to digest both of those. Like, I'm happy for the people that get to experience that moment, especially as fans. But at the same time, like, we're kind of honoring a guy that's got a checkered political or, checkered thoughts that don't really go with the WWE product right now.
Yeah, and it's funny that, and this is vintage WWE. This is WWE going, remember only this part, but forget all that other stuff. And that's what they do.
They can scrub and write the past as they see fit. But I wanted to actually, speaking of guys that they've scrubbed out of the past, I know you talked earlier about being fans of like the Eddies and the Benoits, and obviously they've scrubbed Benoit out for a good reason to say, but like some of those matches for me, and I think we kind of have the same appreciation for those kind of matches. Like that era to me, WrestleMania 18 to WrestleMania 21, was some of the best in-ring stuff. Who were some of your favorites from that time? Was it Eddie and Benoit, or were some other favorites you had around that era?
Yeah, Eddie, Benoit, always been a Kurt Angle fan. Mm-hmm. Triple H, just like he was a guy I really looked up to. I had a poster of him on the back of my bedroom door at my parents' house. I just loved how he looked the part. Like he had the best entrance. Man, at that time, his My Time entrance theme combined with the lighting and the water spit, like I loved that. And when you go back and watch what Triple H was doing at that time and the way that he sold moves, man, nobody did it better than him. And I just feel like for as good as Triple H was, he was overshadowed by guys that were that much more talented at the time, like Angle and Rock and Undertaker and Mankind and Austin. And it's funny that Triple H, as talented as he was like the 5th best guy at that time, which doesn't seem to translate for Triple H because he seems to think that he has like the Undertaker staying power, that if Triple H puts himself in a match at WrestleMania, we're automatically supposed to care.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we do.
I don't know that we do now. I think that the last time he was able to do that was WrestleMania 30 with Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, for sure.
Like 31 was tough with Sting. 32, if I'm not mistaken, was Roman, which didn't work. 33 was Seth. Oh, what do you do on 34? Oh, I'm drawing a blank here.
Yeah.
On 34?
What's that?
Did he wrestle at this last WrestleMania?
Yeah, didn't he? We'll have to look this up here.
Yeah, we'll answer this question. Because I know he wrestled Seth at 33. I'm drawing a blank on what he did last WrestleMania, or the most.
I was there, so I feel like I should remember this.
And it was in New Orleans. Oh, it was Ronda. He did the thing.
That's right. That was probably the best match of the card.
Yeah, either that or Charlotte and Asuka. Yeah, those are the two best matches on the card.
Yeah, no, that was great. I was there watching people bat around beach balls during that main event.
I want to ask, because you were there, and I know as a fan how it was sitting there for 6-7 hours for a really long show, and by the end of it, I had smelled like Popeyes and just tired food and all that. Like, how is it for you sitting through that whole thing at the Superdome?
I've been to 8 WrestleManias, and WrestleMania is a long day. And that's the thing. It's a long day as a fan when you're watching on TV, but it's an even longer day when you're a fan getting there, because you got all this excitement. You want to get there early. You want to get some merchandise. Maybe you want to grab a drink, and then you realize that you're there for 9 or 10 hours, and you get exhausted. You're tired, and a match like Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns for the 74th time isn't going to be very exciting, especially when at that time we all thought that Brock Lesnar was leaving. Yes. I mean, we kind of all thought that Roman was going over, Brock was going to win, and then go to UFC. So I actually said to my friends, me and 3 of my friends, we fly to wherever WrestleMania is every year. We were walking out of the Superdome. We kind of went, that wasn't good. It's fun to be with my friends and have this experience. And New Orleans is a hell of a city. But I said, I don't know if we need to go to Mania next year. We can fly to the city and we can be part of the events, and WrestleCon's a ton of fun, and Evolve puts on some great shows, and all the other stuff going on around is really fun. WrestleMania itself is it's not even a marathon. It's 5 marathons put together. I feel like they should have a sign when you walk in the door that oh, did you remember to pack your lunch? Because I feel like people go there and don't eat, because what are you going to eat? Hot dogs and pizza? The Superdome's food was not exactly great. And next year, I don't know why they're going back to New York. It's New York in April. First of all, we risk ourselves sitting out there in snow. That is a possibility. And if not snow, it might be in the 30s when WrestleMania is happening. Plus, New York's just not an easy city to get it's easy to get around in terms of riding the subway or whatever. But the great thing about going to New Orleans or Orlando or all these other cities they've had it in recently is the entire city transforms and embraces having WrestleMania there. New York already has 1,000 things going on any given day of the week, on any given day of the year. So to bring WrestleMania in there, it's almost more of an inconvenience for these New Yorkers. It's this thing's here? Oh, I guess. So I'm looking forward to whatever matches they're having. In all honesty, I'm not looking forward to being in East Rutherford, New Jersey, watching that, whatever they put together.
Yeah, I know. I'd heard they were going back to New York, and it took me back to WrestleMania 29, which was also at MetLife, and that really wasn't the best That wasn't a really fun card. Other than, to me, the best match on that card was Punk Undertaker. But the card in itself really wasn't great. In the show, I get that WWE is New York is always going to be their home base, and New York's got the big city feel and all that, but just to sit there for 6 or 7 hours at a show and you expect fans to be as engaged by the main event. The impression that I got watching WrestleMania 34 is after Ronda and Triple H, the fans were just tired and they weren't interested And, you have 70,000 wrestling fans in essentially a box for 7 hours. Like,
Yeah.
they're going to start to get tired and they're going to start to reject the stories that you need to tell, which looks really bad for the viewing audience who's following along.
Yeah, and when you're there live, you've got, I think, 14 matches, I think is what we ended up seeing, like, which was way too much. And
Yeah.
John Cena's on the card for a match that lasted like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Undertaker's entrance legitimately lasted longer than that match. Like,
Yeah.
what was the point?
That was one that always kind of struck me, is like, that to me, when I wrote about this, I think around WrestleMania 30, like, I thought that was like their last dream match that they had. I would have wished that was one that I wish we could have got like a really good build for, telling a good story. I didn't really like the story leading up to it, with Undertaker not showing up and Cena just coming out and cutting these promos, which has kind of been par for the course for Undertaker for the past couple of years at Mania. But I thought that match could have been so much better if they would have just pulled the trigger on that 4 or 5 years previously.
The most fun thing, if we're still talking about WrestleMania last year, was Braun Strowman and Nicholas. Like, that was so much fun watching that all come together.
Yeah, that was something that, like, I didn't know what they were going to do as a fan. And I think as a fan, that's what makes it a lot of fun, to where you don't really know what's going to happen. And that kid's going to have that moment for the rest of his life. And that was for me, like, as a fan, like, it would have been cool to probably see Braun get like a wrestler that they could tell his long-term story with. But sometimes wrestling just needs to be fun for the sake of just pure joy that the kids are going to have.
That was just a great WrestleMania moment. In fact, maybe one of the best WrestleMania moments of that whole show.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was a show that, even back to what you said earlier about Brock and Roman, like, that was another time to where fans were ready, in a sense, I think, to get behind Roman. I thought Roman was going to take that one. And again, like, Brock walks out as champion, and it made it really difficult for Roman to consistently look strong when he was, 0-500 against Brock at that time. And then he got it, he got it at SummerSlam, which was good, but that would have been a really cool moment for Roman to have at WrestleMania 34. And I wish he would have been able to have that one. Yeah,
I agree. But I think that because we were expecting Roman to win, I think that's exactly why he didn't win.
Yeah. Their best match to me out of their whole feud was their WrestleMania 31 match, which was, in my backyard at Levi's. But what was funny is, it was just when I had moved back from Vegas, and I thought to myself, okay, I can go to NXT, I can go to Access, but something about that WrestleMania 31 card wasn't as appealing. I was like, oh, I'll just go to Access, and then I'll go to, NXT. Then I remember sitting on my friend's couch watching Rollins cash in, being like, oh, I should have been there.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. That cash in was unexpected, and that was pretty awesome to be there for.
Yeah, and there were a lot of things about that card that were really cool. There was, the curb stomp into the RKO. There was, even though it was for nostalgia's sake, which I think, in some parts wrestling is fine to be nostalgic. It was cool to see, the NWO and the DX in a WrestleMania ring. It was cool to see,
we saw Ronda step into a ring that night. Zack Ryder won the U.S. title, which caught us all by surprise, and we loved. And it's funny, the night before, I was hanging out with Dolph Ziggler and Zack Ryder, and I said to Zack, I said, "What are the odds that you're actually going to win tomorrow?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know, man. We'll see." Because Zack had been jobbing like every single week up till that point, and I was kind of saying it like in jest, like, "Yeah, you should win, but they're never going to put you over." And next night he actually won, which was actually pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was a lot of those, I'm glad that someone like him was able to get that WrestleMania moment. Because he's someone that's been there, he's worked so hard, he's tried to create new things. Like, he was one of the first, like, to me, Colt Cabana was the first wrestling podcast. And also in that same vein, Zack Ryder was one of the first guys to really take advantage of social media and YouTube with his Z Long Island Stories. And to go from where that was to where wrestling and social media have really combined now, it's really fun. And to me, I always look at Zack Ryder as a guy who was kind of at the forefront of that.
Yeah, and it'd be nice for them to give him another rub. I just feel like, there's a lot of guys that are around his age that just are, I get it. They're the younger guys are getting an opportunity and a shot, and that makes sense. But I just wish, like I've been saying this for years, I just wish that a guy like Ziggler gets one more run, because I think he's one of, if not the most talented in-ring performers that we have.
Yeah, I think this is actually the one of the better runs that Ziggler's been on, with teaming with McIntyre when he did, and having those great matches that he had with Rollins. And I think if nothing else, this has sort of been one of his more consistent runs, because I think one of the more frustrating things, at least for me with Ziggler, is they would do a lot of start-stop booking. I think that was something that got Cesaro was afflicted by that for a while as well. But I think, to see Ziggler be in a prominent role in a lot of the pay-per-views and closing out a pay-per-view with being in the Intercontinental match, like that was something to where I was really excited for, because it's showcasing what he does well, which is wrestling. He's a great wrestler in the ring.
And I think that 2019 is the year that The Miz gets another title run, which is long, long overdue in my opinion.
I do too. I don't know if I really bought The Miz at WrestleMania 27 when he beat Cena. I think they were trying to force something that wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
But now everything he does just is so good that, like, there's not one thing I can say that, like, he does well. Like, he cuts amazing promos, but he also has great matches. So it's not like one over the other. And I think sometimes as fans, like, it has to be one or the other. But there's nothing that Miz does that I can say that I'm not a fan of. And I think that's a huge testament to the consistency and the hard work that guys like Miz and Ziggler, I think, as much as they've been afflicted with inconsistent booking, I think fans understand how hard those guys are working to make bad situations turn great. And even, Miz cutting great promos this last couple of years, fans really recognize that. And regardless if the direction it might be to boo them, those are two guys that are really hard to dislike.
Oh, I completely agree. And I don't know. I'd like to find out why Miz is not getting booked the way that I think he should. I mean, did he piss someone off? Same with Ziggler. Did he piss someone off? Because you're right. They had start-stop booking where they were, on this path to seemingly being a main eventer, and then out of nowhere, it just completely, like, the wind gets taken out of their sails completely. I'd just like to know what happened there.
Yeah, I would too. And I remember specifically when Ziggler cashed in against Del Rio, I believe it was the Raw after WrestleMania 29.
Yeah.
Like, that reaction, it was something to where it felt like such a good climax to a long struggle that, you would have as a Dolph, people have as a Dolph Ziggler fan, watching him kind of go through the inconsistent booking and the start-stop. And then you finally thought, like, oh, he's going to have this great moment. And then the rug gets pulled out from us. And I hope that those two guys get the recognition that they deserve next year, and they get the opportunity to have their WrestleMania moments and have that consistent time at the top of the card, because I think they definitely have earned it.
I mean, I think it'd be great to see Miz and Daniel Bryan, but I don't know how that's possible if Daniel Bryan's a heel.
What's funny is it took me a while to kind of buy this heel Daniel Bryan, but I like it. I like it because it's something different. It's something new. And it's an old school heel in a sense, to where, like, no, you fans are the problem, because it would be really hard to boo Daniel Bryan with everything that he's gone through, like, outside the ring, from concussions to, that WrestleMania 30 moment, finally getting it, and seemingly, his career fell apart, and he had some issues in the personal life with his father passing. So it would be really hard to boo Daniel Bryan. So the fact that he's been able to draw that reaction from the fans has been really impressive.
Well, like I said earlier, I think it's the best time to be a pro wrestling fan and the best time to be a pro wrestler, because, we're able to have conversations like this about some, really exciting stuff that's on the horizon. Maybe Raw's in a little bit of a lull right now, but I think come January, we know that Cena's coming back January 7th. Royal Rumble's a couple weeks after that. Like, it might be a little dry right now, but I feel like it's about to get really good. I think we're going to get a wave of some great stuff coming in here soon.
Absolutely. So I want to send this one home. Every time I have a guest on, I always ask them one very important question. What was the last thing you watched on the network?
The last thing I watched on the network? Oh my God. It would have been NXT. It would have been last week's NXT. Yeah. I honestly just watch the wrestling on the network. I don't watch a ton of the original shows. Just because I don't have a ton of free time to watch that. So that's where I watch my, and I don't watch NXT live on there. I'll watch it whenever I have a free moment. So Yeah, that was it for me. What about you? What was the last thing you watched on the network?
I am actually before we recorded this, I started work at 5 o'clock in the morning. I watched Raw 649, which is unfortunately 2 episodes away from the Eddie Guerrero tribute episode that I have been dreading. And I want to keep the order going that I've been watching, but I do not want to sit through that episode because I haven't seen it in its entirety since I watched it. And yeah, that's going to be a tough one to get through.
What is the main event of the match that you just, or the Raw that you just watched?
John Cena against Shawn Michaels.
Oh, okay. That's pretty good.
And they had a really good match at WrestleMania 23, and then they had a really good Iron Man match after that. But this main event is going to be Cena against Michaels. They're leading into Taboo Tuesday, so they're doing a lot with Cena, Michaels, Angle. It was the first Taboo Tuesday where fans can sort of select what's going on. Big Van Vader came back for an episode. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
And this was the episode to where they did the infamous JR colon cancer thing where like Vince pulled JR's head out of his ass, and it's it's an interesting Raw. We'll just say that we'll say that.
Well, I think I'd be okay if I didn't rewatch that one.
Yeah, I think you can do okay with missing that one. There's a couple gems. I think this was one of the years where Edge really came into his own as a heel. That Matt Hardy Edge angle, there was obviously some truth in that, but it was really well done from a presentation standpoint. Like if I wasn't knowing what was going on, it legitimately looked like Matt Hardy was invading Raw. And I think that there was a lot of realism and a lot of accuracy to that. So it made it very believable. And this is also the year where Shelton Benjamin had that excellent match with Shawn Michaels to where everyone always remembers the finish where Shelton jumps from the top rope and Michael super kicks him. But those guys had a really good wrestling match before that finish.
Yeah. Oh, anything Shelton does is so good. It's nice to see him back.
Absolutely. And you know what's funny is he's still as good as he was. Like he's still having great matches. He's still doing a lot of good stuff on SmackDown. Shelton's been a guy I've been a fan of ever since he came in. Like I just like his athleticism has always been off the charts to me. That's another guy that I wish I knew what didn't click to where he didn't have a top run, but he's someone who's, he's always going to put on good matches.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more with you. He's one of the most talented in ring, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. He has that amateur background, and it just makes it feel that much more authentic.
Yeah, it's believable, and I think that's sometimes what can get lost in some WWE due to the theatrics of some of the product, some of the characters, but those guys like Shelton and Kurt and Brock, and even a guy like Charlie Haas, like a lot of the stuff they did just felt like they were going 100 miles an hour, and it felt believable.
For sure. No, you're totally right about that.
So where can people check out your stuff on social media? I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find you.
It's just my name, at Chris Van Vliet, VanVliet. I've got a bunch of YouTube interviews that I'm about to post. I had a great chat with Teddy Hart, who opened up about his time in jail and how it's changed him completely. He spent a year in jail, and now he's turned his life around completely and turned his career around as well. I just posted my interview with Brian Pillman Jr., and I got a low-key interview coming up soon as well. So yeah, it's just my name, at Chris Van Vliet. And Ryan, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. It's always good to talk wrestling.
Always. Yeah, no, it was a great chat. It was a lot of fun. It's stuff like this where you come across people online, you can have a good solid wrestling, chat to where it's not really bashing a current product or complaining about this and that, but just talking about the stuff about wrestling that we enjoy. Those are things that I always find to be a lot of fun because, especially in, 2018 with social media, everyone's got their opinions, and it can be refreshing to have like a conversation where we're just talking about stuff about wrestling that we like and all that. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I really appreciate you making the time as well, Chris.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. It's nice. You're right. It's nice to not bash it like you see so much on Twitter. There is some good in there, and there's actually a lot of good in there, and I'm glad that we're able to focus on that.
Absolutely. So you guys can check out all 89 episodes of the podcast by subscribing to Gully Blanchard Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get podcasts. You can always follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, Gullyblanchard. There is no Twitter. I'm sorry, there's no Instagram. There's no Facebook. There's no pretty much nothing else. That's the main social media place that I have. This will be available for you guys to download. Obviously, you're downloading it now. And it's also going to be available on No Coast Bias. Shout out to Derek. And you can also check out the writing I do for the Kings at A Royal Pain. Rafe and Jonathan do a lot of really good stuff over there. My basketball team's finally fun again. It took us about 15 years, but we're finally fun. So I'm going to enjoy that as well. Until then, we will be back next week live from California on a recorded podcast. Till then, you guys be good to one another. And have a good week.